An anthology of readings of Almighty God's words. God is the Lord of all creation. One stage of the work of the two previous ages was carried out in Israel, and one was carried out in Judea. Generally speaking, neither stage of this work left Israel, and each was performed upon the first chosen people. As a result, the Israelites believe that Jehovah God is only the God of the Israelites. Because Jesus worked in Judea, where he carried out the work of the crucifixion, the Jews view him as the Redeemer of the Jewish people. They think that he is solely the King of the Jews, not of any other people, that he is not the Lord who redeems the English, nor the Lord who redeems the Americans, but the Lord who redeems the Israelites, and that it was the Jews whom he redeemed in Israel. In actuality, God is the master of all things. He is the God of all creation. He is not only the God of the Israelites, nor of the Jews. He is the God of all creation. The previous two stages of his work took place in Israel, which has created certain notions in people. They believe that Jehovah did his work in Israel, that Jesus himself carried out his work in Judea, and, furthermore, that he became flesh to work. And whatever the case, this work did not extend beyond Israel. God did not work in Egyptians or Indians. He only worked in the Israelites. Thus do people form various notions and delineate God's work within a certain scope. They say that when God works, he must do so among the chosen people and in Israel. Save for the Israelites, God works upon no others, nor is there any greater scope to his work. They are especially strict when it comes to keeping God incarnate in line, and do not permit him to move beyond the bounds of Israel. Are these not all just human notions? God made all of the heavens and earth and all things. He made all of creation. So how could he restrict his work to only Israel? If that were the case, what would be the point of him making all creation? He created the whole world, and he has carried out his 6,000-year management plan, not only in Israel, but upon every person in the universe. Regardless of whether they live in China, the United States, the United Kingdom, or Russia, every person is a descendant of Adam. They are all made by God. Not one of them can escape the bounds of creation, and not one of them can separate themselves from the label of descendant of Adam. They are all God's creatures. They are all the offspring of Adam, and they are also all the corrupted descendants of Adam and Eve. It is not only the Israelites who are God's creation, but all people. It is just that some have been cursed and some have been blessed. There are many agreeable things about the Israelites. God worked upon them in the beginning because they were the least corrupt. The Chinese do not bear comparison to them. They are far inferior. So, God initially worked among the people of Israel, and the second stage of his work was only carried out in Judea, which has led to a lot of notions and rules among man. In fact, If God were to act according to human notions, he would only be the God of the Israelites, and would thus be incapable of extending his work to the Gentile nations. For he would only be the God of the Israelites, and not the God of all creation. The prophecies said that Jehovah's name would be magnified among the Gentile nations, that it would spread to the Gentile nations. Why was this prophesied? If God were only the God of the Israelites, then he would only work in Israel. Moreover, he would not spread this work, and he would not make such a prophecy. Since he did make this prophecy, he will surely extend his work among the Gentile nations, among every nation and all lands. Since he said this, he must do it. This is his plan, for he is the Lord who created the heavens and earth and all things, and the God of all creation. Regardless of whether he works among the Israelites or throughout the whole of Judea, the work he does is the work of the entire universe and the work of all humanity. The work he does today in the nation of the Great Red Dragon, in a Gentile nation, is still the work of all humanity. Israel could be the base for his work on earth. Likewise, China can also be the base for his work among the Gentile nations. Has he not now fulfilled the prophecy that the name of Jehovah shall be magnified among the Gentile nations? The first step of his work among the Gentile nations is this work, the work he does in the nation of the Great Red Dragon. That God incarnate should work in this land and work among these cursed people is particularly at odds with human notions. These are the lowliest people of all. They have no worth, and they were initially forsaken by Jehovah. People can be abandoned by other people, but if they are abandoned by God, then no one is more devoid of status. No one is of lower worth. For a creature of God, being possessed by Satan or being abandoned by people is something that feels very painful. But for a creature to be forsaken by the Creator means that they could have no lower status. The descendants of Moab were cursed, and they were born in this backward country. Without a doubt, of all the people under the influence of darkness, the descendants of Moab have the lowest status. Because these people have heretofore been of the lowest status, the work done upon them is best able to shatter human notions, and is also most beneficial to the whole of God's 6,000-year management plan. Doing such work among these people is the best way of shattering human notions. And with this, God launches an era. With this, he shatters all human notions. With this, he ends the work of the entire age of grace. His first work was carried out in Judea, within the bounds of Israel. Among the Gentile nations, he did not do any work to launch the new era. The final stage of work is not only carried out among the Gentiles, but even more so among those who have been cursed. This one point is the evidence most capable of humiliating Satan, and thus God becomes the God of all creation in the universe, the Lord of all things, the object of worship for everything with life. Today, there are those who still do not understand what new work God has begun. Among the Gentile nations, God has ushered in a new beginning. He has begun a new era and initiated new work. And He performs this work upon the descendants of Moab. Is this not His newest work? No one throughout history has ever experienced this work before. No one has even heard of it, much less appreciated it. God's wisdom, God's wonder, God's unfathomability, God's greatness, and God's holiness are all made manifest through this stage of work, the work of the last days. Is this not new work? Work that shatters human notions? There are those who think thusly: since God cursed Moab and said that He would abandon Moab's descendants, how could He save them now? These are the Gentiles who were cursed by God and driven out of Israel. The Israelites called them Gentile dogs. In everyone's view, they are not only Gentile dogs, but even worse, the sons of destruction, which is to say, they are not God's chosen people. They may have been born within the bounds of Israel, but they do not belong to the people of Israel, and were expelled to Gentile nations. They are the lowliest of all people. It is precisely because they are the lowliest among humanity that God carries out His work of launching a new age among them, for they are representative of corrupt humanity. God's work is selective and targeted. The work He does in these people today is also work that is performed upon creation. Noah was a creature of God, as are his descendants. Anyone in the world who are of flesh and blood are creatures of God. God's work is directed at all of creation. It is not dependent on whether someone is cursed after they were created. His management work is directed at all of creation, not those chosen people who have not been cursed. Since God wishes to carry out His work among His creation, He will certainly carry it out to successful completion, and He will work among those people who are beneficial to His work. Therefore, He shatters all conventions when He works among people. To Him, the words cursed, chastised, and blessed are meaningless. The Jewish people are good, as are the chosen people of Israel. They are people of good caliber and humanity. In the beginning, it was among them that Jehovah launched His work and performed His earliest work. But to perform the work of conquest on them today would be meaningless. They, too, may be part of creation, and there may be much that is positive about them. But to carry out this stage of work among them would be pointless. God would not be able to conquer people, nor would He be able to convince all of creation, which is precisely the point of switching His work to these people of the nation of the great red dragon. Of greatest significance here is His launching an era, His shattering of all rules and all human notions, and His ending of the work of the entire age of grace. If His current work were carried out among the Israelites, by the time His 6,000-year management plan comes to a close, everyone would believe that God is only the God of the Israelites, that only the Israelites are God's chosen people, that only the Israelites deserve to inherit God's blessing and promise. God's incarnation during the last days in the Gentile nation of the country of the great red dragon accomplishes the work of God as the God of all creation. He completes the whole of his management work, and he ends the central part of his work in the nation of the great red dragon. The core of these three stages of work is the salvation of man, namely, making all of creation worship the Creator. Thus, there is great meaning to each stage of work. God does nothing that is without meaning or value. On one hand, this stage of work ushers in a new era and ends the previous two eras. On the other hand, it shatters all human notions and all the old ways of human belief and knowledge. The work of the previous two ages was carried out according to different human notions. This stage, however, completely eliminates human notions, thereby utterly conquering humanity. Through conquering the descendants of Moab, through the work carried out among the descendants of Moab, God shall conquer all people throughout the universe. This is the deepest significance of this stage of his work, and it is the most valuable aspect of this stage of his work. Even if you now know that your own status is lowly and that you are of low worth, you will still feel that you have met with the most joyous thing. You have inherited a great blessing, received a great promise, and you can help accomplish this great work of God. You have beheld God's true countenance. You know God's inherent disposition, and you do God's will. The previous two stages of God's work were carried out in Israel. If this stage of his work during the last days were also carried out among the Israelites, not only would all of creation believe that only the Israelites were God's chosen people, but God's entire management plan would fail to attain its desired effect. During the period in which the two stages of his work were carried out in Israel, no new work, nor any work of launching a new era, was carried out among the Gentile nations. Today's stage of work, the work of launching a new era, is first carried out among the Gentile nations, and is, furthermore, initially carried out among the descendants of Moab, thus launching the entire era. God has shattered any knowledge contained within human notions, permitting none of it to remain. In his work of conquest, he has shattered human notions, those old, earlier human ways of knowledge. He lets people see that with God there are no rules, that there is nothing old about God, that the work he does is entirely liberated, entirely free, and that he is right in all he does. You must fully submit to any work that he does among creation. All of the work he does has meaning and is carried out according to his own will and wisdom, and not according to human choices and notions. If something is beneficial to his work, he does it, and if something is not beneficial to his work, he does not, no matter how good it is. He works and selects the recipients and location of his work in accordance with the meaning and purpose of his work. He does not adhere to past rules when he works, nor does he follow old formulas. Instead, he plans his work according to the work's significance. Ultimately, he will attain a genuine effect and the anticipated goal. If you do not understand these things today, this work will have no effect in you.